Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, today we're going to take a look at the Majority Complete Edition from Ninja Star Games, but in particular, we're going to take a look at one of the two games that come in this box, and that is the original Majority, just called The Majority. In a separate video that's going to go up along with this one, I'm going to take a look at the Majority 2. So this is only for the original Majority. Both games are very different, although thematically they have some of the same elements. Now, what this game is thematically, there's like this dark assembly where all of these sort of spirit creatures and ghostly creatures will assemble. You've got witches, demons, dragons, reapers, and such. And although the artwork is kind of cartoony and more lighthearted than that description would really have you believe. And in the Majority, it's a drafting and set collection game. You are drafting these different cards that represent the different board members of the assembly, and you are trying to gain power over each of the three different main colored factions. Now, the game can be played with either 3 players or 4 players, and if it's a 4-player game, it's actually a team game where you and your partner are helping each other, and a 3-player game is just every man or woman for himself. The interesting gimmick in this game is that you are trying to gain a majority of these different factions, but you don't want the most of every faction, because the most points that you can get are going to be scored if you are the second most in control of each of these factions. I know that's very, very confusing. I'm not describing it well. Let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played. Hopefully that will make things a little bit clearer. Then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief rundown of the Majority 1, or just the Majority. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that, as I mentioned in my intro, this is the complete edition version of the game. So there's another game, the Majority 2, packaged with this that will use these chips as well. And there's actually other components that come in the box, but that are only used for the Majority 2. So I'm not going to bother showing you those. This is just for the Majority 1 stuff. So you have these point chips, you have this little spy marker, kind of generic meeple thing I've seen in many other games. And then you have the deck of board member cards. All these board member cards have different characters depicted, like sort of dark, mischievous characters depicted on them with numbers, and a few of them, like these, have special powers, but I'll get back to those in a minute. Now, these cards are just placeholder cards. If this whole game is about set collecting. You're taking cards that and adding up number values on them, and eventually, because you go over 4 rounds of play, you're going to have a lot of cards in front of you, and it can be kind of hard at a glance to tell how many points someone has in one particular faction. That's what you use these cards for. You're going to put that down, that depicts 10, and you can get rid of cards equaling 10 and keep using these a bunch of these in order to keep track of points easier. It's not really totally necessary, though. So the Majority is played over 4 rounds of play, and the goal is to have the most coins at the end of those 4 rounds. Coins, points, I'm kind of using the terms interchangeably. I guess I'll just call them coins from here on out, and I'll call the numbers on the cards points. But one important thing to note is that you can play this game with either 3 or 4 players. Now, if you play this in a 4-player game, it's a team game. 2 of you are working together, and you have to sit opposite each other diagonally, meaning that it's always going to go Team 1, Team 2, like Team 1, Team 2, Team 1, Team 2, so that you never have your own partner on either your left or your right. If you play this in as just a 3-player game, it's just every man for himself. It works essentially the same. You take out some extra cards, and you're not working with anyone. You're trying to get as many points for yourself. Now, at the start of the game, each player is going to be dealt out 6 cards, and then you are going to take your... Now, at the start of the game, each player is going to be dealt out 6 cards from the board member deck, and then you're going to go through the 3 different phases of the game. You're going to do this 4 times. There's 4 rounds in the game. The first is the selection phase. Selection phase is simply card drafting. You're picking and passing. You're putting one card face down in front of you, passing the rest of the cards to your left, and you're going to keep doing this until you have a brand new hand of 6 cards. Now, in rounds 2 through 4, things work a little bit differently, because after you get done with the playing part of the phase, the representation phase, you're actually going to hold over 1 card from your hand until the next round, and then with that card, you're just going to be dealt out an additional 4 cards so that you have a total of 5 cards in hand. And you're actually going, during the next phase is the representation phase, where you actually play the cards that you chose during the selection phase. For the first round, you're going to play 5 of those cards. For the following rounds, you're only going to play 4 of them. And how this works is very simply taking one of the cards from your hand that you previously selected during the selection phase, everyone puts down simultaneously, and then flips over simultaneously and resolves them. Now, most of the cards in the deck are just numbered cards, which is not like that one. Let me show you a typical example here. So here's the 10, which is actually the highest value card in the deck. There's 3 different factions, 3 different colors in the deck, and their values go up to 10. So if this was the card that I played, I'd very simply put that in front of me along with any other red cards that I've played, and now that is points. However, 3 of the cards actually have special abilities, so 4 of them do. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. First, you have the 0 of each color. If you play the 0, then you always resolve the special abilities of these cards in order from lowest to highest. So zeros will always take effect first. Anyone that plays a 0 is going to steal any cards of the same color. So if I play the yellow 0, I'm going to take every other yellow card that was played on this turn. Then you have the 2s. The way the 2s work is that you, remember, this will only take effect if it was not stolen by the 0, because you have to go in order. But if you play the 2, then you're going to kill every card that is not the color of the 2. So if I play the blue 2, every card that is not blue gets killed and immediately discarded. Then I have the 3 card, and this one's a bit weird. The way that this one works, and I should probably flip it face up. Well, actually, I'm not sure which way is face up for that, but the way that this one is going to work is that when I play the card, I'm going to take the spy marker, and I'm going to put that in front of me. And by the way, the spy marker is going to break ties at the end of the game, so people tend to try and hold on to that when you get to the last round of the game. But when I play that, I put the spy marker in front of me, and now every other player during the next representation phase, meaning the next turn when you be playing cards in front of you, starting with the player to your right, you are going to play cards face up. So let me explain. It's a little bit confusing, but in a 4-player game, the player to your right, which is going to be one of the other team's members, in the next representation phase has to play their next card face up. Then you're going to play your card face up, and then your opponent's other team member is going to flip their card, play their card face up, and then your teammate gets to play their card face up. Now, what does this mean? Remember that normally you're playing cards face down and flipping simultaneously. Well, now by playing the 3, you are gaining the spy token and forcing everyone to play their cards face up. And this does help you because your teammate, because they sit across from you and because you're starting from the right of you, is going to play their card last. So they get to see what you and the other players on the opposing team play before they play down a card. So the 3, although it's kind of confusing to use, when played strategically, can be very powerful. And finally, we have the 7 card. The way the 7 card works is that when you would play this, instead of putting it into your own scoring area, instead you put it in the scoring area of the player to your right. And now, after you've played all your cards, we get to scoring, because I know that the obvious question you have is, well, okay, the player to your right is your opposing team, so why would you want to give them point cards? Well, that's the gimmick of this game, the way the scoring works. In this game, if you have a majority of cards and numbers for one of the colors, let's say when we get to the debate phase, which is the last phase of the rounds, we add up all the cards that we have for each individual color and see who has the higher total at the table. Whichever individual player, and at the end of the game, if you're playing on teams, you add your points together, but whatever individual player has the most of one color, so let's say I've got I don't know, let's just put a bunch of red out here. Boom, I've got a lot of red. So I've got 27 red points. Boom, I'm really dominating in red. You get 2 points. That's what you get for having the majority of that color. And you'll do this for every color. Here's the trick. Whoever has the second most power at the table gets, in coins, 1/5 of what the total power is for the person who did have the majority. So if I had 27 points and I was dominating in red, and I believe it's rounded down, I would then, whoever's in second place is going to get 5 coins instead. They do much better than you. They're getting 1/5 of the power that you've accumulated. So in this game, you actually want to come in second. which is a weird thing to wrap your head around, but that is the strategy of the game. Manipulating the cards that you play and give to other players, hence the 7, so that you are not in the majority. Instead, you want to be in second place, which is easier said than done. You're going to do this 4 times and then at the end of 4 rounds, see who has the most points. The the spy marker is going to be a tiebreaker. Whoever's closest to it or whoever actually possesses it will break ties in their favor or their team's favor. That is the majority or the majority one. Let's get to my final thoughts. Well, theme and components. This is not the most thematic game in the world. It's just a card drafting game, and I don't think I've played many card drafting games that are really thematic, including my favorite game, Seasons, which has some card drafting in it. But I do enjoy the artwork and the general aesthetic very, very much. I always like this sort of, I don't know, it's somewhere between chibi and goth type artwork. I've seen this kind of style in other depictions, and I dig it quite a bit. I like it. The card quality is not the greatest, and the other components like the little coin chips and the little very, very generic meeple that you use for the spy. I've seen that in a lot of other games and prototypes that I have played for previews, so that's not that great, but you know, that's not really the most important thing. I think that the artwork and the visual representation is key here, and they do a very good job with that. Moving on to the gameplay, this is a very intriguing game. I would say it's very light, but at the same time, it feels kind of crunchy because of how the scoring in this game works. And it's one of those games where the first time you play it, it's very easy for me to explain. People who I explain the rules are going to be like, okay, got it. That's simple enough. But you're not really going to get it until after you're done with your first game, at which point you're going to say, and you may look at your partner and say, oh, that's what we were supposed to do. That's kind of how this works. It's very intriguing how you are trying to, the whole general idea is just coming in second. You want to come in second and not be first, because being first gets you not much at all. But how you actually go about doing that is the cool part, because it's using the special abilities on the cards in the best way possible, knowing when to kill other people's cards with the 3, or I think it's the 2, and knowing when to flip around with the 3, or more importantly, I think one of the most difficult cards to use properly is the 7, the betrayal card, which you will put into your right hand, therefore your opponents, if you're playing in a 4-player game, it's piles. So it's like, okay, here, take this. No, keep that away from me, because you don't want to have the outright majority in this game. And I find that interaction really, really fascinating, along with solid draft. I mean, I like drafting in general, and I think that it works very well in this game together with that whole mechanism and how the 3-card interacts and makes you play your cards face up and can really help out your partner quite a bit. If there's a downside to the game, and I kind of already mentioned it, is that it's hard to understand at first, and it can be a bit stressful, at least for me. I put this on the stress level of Hanabi in a way, which is not necessarily bad, but in Hanabi it's always like just total pressure to make the right play, whether you're playing or discarding a card. And this game is, I'm only talking about the team version for right now. I've played the 3-player version, and it's fine. It works good. It's still a decent game, but I think the team version is where it's the most interesting, because in the team version, you're looking over at your partner, and you can't like discuss strategy, and you're just like, yeah, play it right there. You're trying to you're like, you do not want them to play certain cards. You can sit there thinking that you have the perfect strategy, like, yes, okay, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give my opponent this card, I'm going to play this 0, don't play any blue cards right now, and we should be okay doing this. But how do you get that across to them, hoping that they're not going to make the wrong play? Meanwhile, they're thinking the same thing, like, I got a plan here, don't screw up. And I love that interaction. That is stressful. It's not going to be for everybody, and I played this with a couple of different groups of people, and sure enough, it's kind of like that spades thing, where if your partner does something that you think is stupid, you're going to get upset about it. No matter how stupid that is in general, that is kind of how this game will work. And for that reason, I think this is probably meant to be played with teams, even though 3-player works just fine and is still interesting because of the scoring mechanism. With teams, it just adds a whole other layer. So I think the game is very interesting. It's not like earth-shatteringly great, but it's cool for what it is. I like the art style. I always love drafting games, especially when they're light ones like this. And you just gotta dig that gimmick. It just comes across so well. So that is the Majority Part 1 of the Majority Complete Edition. I do recommend it, but do I recommend the other game that comes in this box? Well, if you're getting the box anyways, you're going to have them both, but I'll still go ahead and let you know what I think about that one in a separate video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.